I was standing at my father's funeral when my phone buzzed. Not a long vibration, not an emergency call, just a short, casual text, like the kind you send when you're out of milk or running late. I didn't look at it right away. My hands were folded in front of me, fingers numb, nails pressing into skin I couldn't feel anymore. The casket was being lowered into the ground. The sound of dirt hitting wood felt louder than it should have, each thud landing somewhere deep in my chest. Then my uncle leaned in and whispered, "Are you okay?" Something must have changed on my face. I glanced down. The message was from my boyfriend. "Hey babe, I took Duke to the shelter on Riverside. He was shedding too much, and you know my allergies. They said he'll find a good home." For a second, my brain refused to connect the words. Shelter. Duke. Past tense. The world didn't spin. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. Everything just slowed. Duke wasn't just a dog. He was my emotional support animal. Prescribed. Documented. Protected under federal law. He slept beside me every night after the accident. He was there when the panic attacks hit and my lungs forgot how to work. He was there when my father got sick, when the hospital rooms became routine, when grief started showing up early, before the funeral ever did. And my boyfriend knew all of that. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not there. Not with my father being buried in front of me. Not with people watching me hold myself together out of pure instinct. I slid my phone back into my purse and finished burying the man who raised me alone after my mother died. I didn't scream, I didn't confront anyone, I didn't break down. But something inside me hardened. Because while I was saying goodbye to my father, the man I trusted most had decided, very deliberately, that it was the perfect moment to get rid of the one thing keeping me emotionally stable. And he didn't just give Duke away. He almost had him killed. I didn't know that yet, but I was about to. I met him 2 years ago, at a time when my life felt fragile in ways I didn't yet have language for. My father had already been sick then. Not terminal, at least not in the way doctors say it out loud, but sick enough that every phone call carried weight. I was juggling work, hospital visits, and the quiet fear that comes from watching the strongest person you know slowly shrink into someone you're afraid to lose. He came into my life like stability. He was charming in a soft, effortless way. The kind of man who listened when you spoke, who remembered details, who made you feel seen without demanding too much in return. He told me early on that he admired how independent I was, that I was strong, but not in the way men sometimes say it like a warning. When I told him about the car accident, about the PTSD, the anxiety, the psychiatrist visits, he didn't flinch. When I told him about Duke, he smiled. "A dog person," he said. "Good. That says a lot about someone." Duke loved him almost immediately. That should have been my first warning. After 8 months of dating, he moved in. Not officially, not on the lease, but gradually, naturally. A toothbrush here, clothes in the closet, his coffee mug replacing one of mine. It felt easy, safe, domestic in the way that makes you believe you're building something solid. He knew Duke was a registered emotional support animal. He'd seen the paperwork, the psychiatrist's letter, the lease clause that specifically protected Duke under the Fair Housing Act. We talked about it when he moved in. He never objected, at least not out loud. But little things started to surface. Comments about shedding, jokes about needing a lint roller just to sit on the couch, offhand remarks about allergies that had never required medication before. I adjusted, vacuumed more, bought air purifiers, washed Duke's bedding obsessively. I told myself this was what compromise looked like. Relationships meant adapting, right? My father's health declined faster that second year. Hospital rooms became familiar. Beeping monitors, that sterile smell that never leaves your clothes. Duke stayed close to me during that time, always pressed against my leg, always watching my face like he was waiting for something to go wrong. He slept with his head on my chest the night my dad was admitted for the last time. My boyfriend watched that quietly. He never said anything cruel, never raised his voice, never demanded Duke be gone. He was subtle, patient, waiting. The night my father passed, he held me while I cried, told me I was strong, told me he'd handle things so I wouldn't have to worry. I thought he meant groceries, or phone calls, or logistics. I didn't realize what he actually meant was this, that while I was burying my father, he would decide, without my consent, without legal authority, without empathy, that Duke was expendable, that my grief was an opportunity, and that my absence was permission. The truth is, the decision didn't come out of nowhere. I just didn't want to see it. After my father died, the apartment felt different, quieter in a way that wasn't peaceful. Heavy, Like grief had settled into the corners and refused to move. Duke sensed it immediately. He followed me everywhere, bathroom, kitchen, bedroom, never more than a step behind. That's when my boyfriend's patience started to thin, not in obvious ways, not in arguments or ultimatums. It was the small, sharp comments that slid under the door when I was too tired to block them. He's been really clingy lately. He's shedding more than usual. I woke up sneezing again. I don't think this is healthy for me. I reminded him, gently, that Duke was responding to loss, that animals grieve too, that this was temporary. He nodded, smiled, kissed my forehead, but his eyes didn't soften. One night, a week before the funeral, I caught him standing in the doorway watching Duke sleep. Not with affection, with calculation. "Do you think," he said casually, "you'd ever be okay without him?" The question landed wrong. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I'm just saying," he shrugged. "You've been doing better lately. Therapy, meds. You're stronger now." Stronger. The word felt like a test. "I'm doing better because of him," I said, my hand automatically resting on Duke's back. He didn't argue, didn't push. He just said, "I worry you rely on him too much." After that, I started noticing things. Duke's water bowl moved. The windows opened more often, even when it was cold. Comments made to friends, half joking, half not, about how our apartment was basically a dog kennel. Once, I came home and Duke didn't greet me at the door. I found him in the bedroom, shaking, ears pinned back. "What happened?" I asked. "Oh," my boyfriend said from the couch, eyes still on his phone. "He knocked over a plant earlier. I yelled. He's dramatic." Duke had never been afraid of raised voices before. I told myself I was overreacting, that grief was making me sensitive, that I was projecting my fear of loss onto something that didn't deserve that much weight. The night before the funeral, I laid out my clothes on the bed. Black dress, simple shoes, nothing flashy. Duke sat beside me, watching every movement. My boyfriend leaned against the doorframe. "You'll be gone most of the day, right?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "The service, the burial, probably a reception after." He nodded slowly. "I'll take care of things here," he said. "You just focus on your family." I thanked him. I shouldn't have. Because what I didn't realize then, what still makes my stomach turn when I think about it, was that he had already decided. Not that Duke was inconvenient, not that Duke was a problem, but that Duke was disposable, and that my father's funeral was the safest window he'd ever get. After the funeral, I didn't go to the reception. Everyone else did. My aunts, my cousins, old family friends telling the same stories about my father, laughing softly like joy might soften the loss if we stacked enough memories on top of it. I couldn't. My chest felt tight in that way that warned me a panic attack was close, and Duke wasn't there to ground me. I told my uncle I needed air. He hugged me longer than necessary, like he knew something was wrong but didn't have words for it. I got into my car and just sat there for a moment. Then I drove. The shelter was 45 minutes away. 45 minutes of my mind replaying the text over and over, trying to reinterpret it into something less horrifying. Maybe he meant a temporary foster. Maybe he meant a no-kill rescue. Maybe Duke was fine. Maybe I was catastrophizing. But my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. When I walked into the shelter, the smell hit me first. Cleaning solution, wet fur, something sharp underneath it all. A woman behind the counter looked up and smiled automatically. "How can I help you?" "My dog," I said, and my voice cracked immediately. "He was brought in today. Duke, medium-sized, brown, emotional support animal." Her smile disappeared. She asked my name. I gave it. She typed. Froze. "Oh," she said quietly. "Yes, we have him." She didn't ask for proof, didn't question my claim. She just said, "Let me get a supervisor." That's when my heart dropped. They brought Duke out from the back. He wasn't barking. He wasn't wagging his tail. He was curled into himself in the corner of a metal cage, shaking so hard his tags rattled against the bars. When he saw me, he made a sound I'd never heard before. A cry, high-pitched, desperate. I dropped to my knees. "I'm here," I said, pressing my hands through the bars. "I'm here. I'm so sorry." The shelter worker knelt beside me. "He was surrendered this afternoon," she said gently. "The man who brought him in said he was aggressive and that his owner abandoned him." Aggressive. Duke was afraid of butterflies. My vision blurred. "He's not aggressive," I said. "He's a registered ESA. He has separation anxiety. He's never bitten anyone in his life." The woman nodded. "We figured something was off. He hasn't eaten. He's been shaking nonstop." Another employee joined us. "If you'd come 3 days later," she said quietly, "he would have been on the euthanasia list for Monday." 3 days. My knees gave out. I didn't care who saw me cry. I cried there, on the shelter floor, in my black funeral dress, on the same day I buried my father. They released Duke to me immediately after I showed them the paperwork on my phone. Psychiatrist's letter, ESA registration, lease documentation. Apologies poured out of them. But apologies didn't undo what almost happened. I carried Duke to my car. He pressed his whole body into mine like he was afraid I'd disappear again. Sitting in the driver's seat, I made one phone call. "Can you meet me at my apartment in an hour?" I asked my friend, a locksmith. "I need the locks changed, tonight." I didn't explain more than that. By the time we arrived, I was calm in a way that scared me. The facts lined up cleanly. I was the sole leaseholder. My boyfriend was never added. The lease explicitly protected Duke as an emotional support animal. Attempting to remove or rehome him was a direct lease violation. We changed the locks. I packed his belongings carefully. Clothes folded, electronics wrapped, shoes boxed. Nothing broken, nothing missing. An eviction notice went on the door. I filed a police report for theft. By 6 p.m. it was done. At 11:30 p.m., I heard laughter in the hallway. His. It stopped the moment he tried his key. He stood in the hallway, swaying slightly, phone pressed to his ear, still laughing at whatever joke had followed him home. That laughter died the second he saw the chain on the door. He tried the key once, then again, harder. "What the hell?" he muttered. I didn't open the door right away. Duke pressed against the back of my legs, trembling, his nails clicking softly against the floor. I rested my hand on his head, feeling his heartbeat racing under my palm. My own pulse matched it, steady but cold. "Open the door," my boyfriend called. "Why isn't my key working?" I slid the door open just enough for the chain to hold. His expression shifted from confusion to irritation to fury in the span of a breath. "What is this?" he snapped. "Why are the locks changed?" "You know why," I said. His eyes flicked past me, straight to Duke. "Oh my God," he scoffed. "You actually went and got him back?" "You took my emotional support animal to a shelter," I said. My voice surprised me. It didn't shake. "While I was burying my father." He rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic. It's a dog." Duke whimpered and pressed closer to me. "He's medical equipment," I said. "Documented, prescribed, protected by law." "That's ridiculous," he laughed. "You're really calling a shedding mutt medical equipment now?" I felt something inside me go quiet. "You lied to the shelter," I said. "You told them he was aggressive. You told them I abandoned him." He shrugged. "They needed a reason to take him. Relax." 3 more days, I said, each word precise, and they would have euthanized him. That made him pause, just for a second. Then his face hardened. "Well, maybe that would have been better for everyone." I closed the door, not out of anger, out of finality. He started pounding almost immediately. "Open this door right now," he shouted. "You can't just lock me out." I opened it again, still chained. "You're not on the lease," I said. "You never were. Your eviction notice is taped to the door. Your belongings are boxed. You can collect them and leave." "You're insane," he screamed. "I live here." "You lived here because I allowed it," I said. "You violated the lease. You committed theft." "It's a dog," he shouted. "You're choosing an animal over our relationship." "Yes," I said, "I am." That was when he tried to push past the door. I shut it hard enough that the frame rattled. He called the police. I didn't stop him. When the officers arrived, Duke hid behind my legs again, shaking so badly his collar rattled. I knelt beside him as the door opened. The older officer looked from Duke to me, then to my boyfriend. "What's going on?" he asked. "She stole my dog," my boyfriend said immediately. "She's unstable." I handed the officer my phone. ESA documentation. Psychiatrist's letter. The lease. My name only. The text message admitting he took Duke to the shelter. The shelter intake form with his signature. The false aggression report. The officer's jaw tightened as he scrolled. "You took her emotional support animal to a shelter," he said slowly, "while she was at her father's funeral?" "It's just a dog," my boyfriend snapped. "It's medical equipment under federal law," the officer corrected, "and you're lucky she didn't press charges." "Oh, I am," I said. The officers made him leave. But even as he walked down the hallway, shouting that I'd regret this, I knew something important had shifted. The panic I'd expected never came. What I felt instead was clarity. Sharp, uncomfortable, unavoidable. The kind that arrives when grief strips away every excuse you've ever made for someone and leaves nothing behind but the truth. The silence after the police left didn't last. It never does. By sunrise, my phone was vibrating nonstop on the kitchen counter, lighting up the room with names I hadn't spoken to in months, mutual friends, numbers I didn't recognize, people who had already heard his version before the truth had a chance to put its shoes on. Duke slept curled under the table, exhausted, finally breathing evenly. I stepped carefully around him and answered one call. What happened? A friend asked, cautious but curious. He says you kicked him out over a dog. I didn't argue. I didn't explain out loud. I sent screenshots. His text, the shelter intake form, the ESA documentation, the euthanasia notice dated for Monday. There was a pause on the line. Oh, she said quietly. Oh my God. That word, God, kept showing up in messages all morning. Around noon, he tried a new angle, the apologetic one. I didn't realize it was that serious, he texted from a new number. You know I was drunk. I just panicked about my allergies. We can talk this out. I didn't reply. An hour later, the tone shifted. You embarrassed me in front of the cops. You're making me look like a monster. I hope you're happy ruining my life. By afternoon, the entitlement arrived fully formed. He showed up again. This time sober, this time angry. He stood in the hallway yelling my name like volume might change facts. Neighbors cracked doors. Someone filmed. Duke started shaking before I even reached the door. I didn't open it. Instead, I called the non-emergency line and reported a violation of the eviction notice. He left before officers arrived. That didn't stop him. Saturday afternoon, his mother showed up. She stood outside my door with a look of manufactured concern, holding a purse like a shield. I just want to talk, she said softly when I cracked the door, chain still on. He's distraught. He didn't mean for things to go this far. He took my medical equipment to a shelter, I said, during my father's funeral. She waved a hand dismissively. Let's not exaggerate. He thought he was helping you move on. Move on, I repeated, from my emotional support animal. He shed on his furniture, she snapped, the softness gone. He was uncomfortable in his own home. It was never his home, I said, and comfort doesn't justify cruelty. I pulled up the shelter's website and turned the screen toward her. Duke's intake photo stared back at us, labeled aggressive, with a euthanasia date circled. Her face drained of color. He told me he rehomed him, she whispered. He lied, I said. To you, to the shelter, to the police. For the first time, she had nothing to say. She left without apologizing. Sunday morning, he went public. A post appeared on social media, vague but dramatic, about choosing an animal over a relationship, about being suddenly homeless, about how people with mental health issues shouldn't date if they're that unstable. My phone exploded. I posted once, just once. He surrendered my registered emotional support animal to a shelter while I was at my father's funeral. He told them the dog was aggressive and abandoned. The shelter scheduled euthanasia for Monday, receipts attached. I attached everything. The comments turned fast. Even his friends stopped defending him. By Monday morning, my landlord called. I just got a complaint, he said carefully. Someone reported a dangerous dog in your unit. I laughed. Then I sent him the documentation. Jesus, he muttered after a pause. He did this at your dad's funeral? Yes. I'll send formal property ban paperwork today, he said, and I'm sorry about your loss. Tuesday, animal control arrived. Duke was asleep on his back, legs in the air, snoring softly. The officer took one look and smiled. That's the dangerous dog? I handed over the paperwork again. She shook her head. False reporting is a crime. We'll note this. By Wednesday, the retaliation escalated into something almost impressive in its audacity. I was served. He was suing me for illegal eviction and emotional distress. $10,000. I stared at the paperwork and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was inevitable. I called my cousin, a lawyer. He listened quietly. Then he said, send me everything. I'll handle this pro bono. A pause. This is going to be fun. And for the first time since my father's funeral, I felt something that wasn't grief. I felt ready. The house felt too quiet once the legal papers arrived. Not peaceful, not calm, just hollow. I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope still open in front of me, Duke's head resting on my bare foot like he was anchoring me to the floor. The words blurred together, illegal eviction, emotional distress, damages claimed, all written with a confidence that made my stomach turn. $10,000. As if numbers could erase what he'd done. As if a lawsuit could rewrite the image burned into my mind of Duke shaking in that cage, labeled aggressive, days away from being put down. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound felt louder than it should have been. The hum of the fridge, the click of the thermostat, the elevator down the hall stopping on my floor and making my heart spike like someone was about to knock again. Duke paced. Back and forth, back and forth. I knew the signs, hypervigilance, stress response, trauma mirrored in fur and breath and pacing pause. I'm here, I whispered, even as my own chest tightened. You're safe. But saying it didn't make me believe it. Grief doesn't stack neatly. It piles. My father's death hadn't even settled yet. There were still unanswered messages on my phone from people I didn't have the energy to respond to. sympathy cards unopened on the counter, his jacket still hanging by the door because I couldn't bring myself to move it. And now this. A man I loved, trusted, had taken advantage of the one day I was completely defenseless. He had looked at my absence, my grief, my vulnerability, and decided it was permission. That realization hit harder than the lawsuit. Around 3 in the morning, Duke jumped at a noise outside and started barking. Sharp, panicked. I froze, heart racing, mind already spiraling. What if he came back? What if he tried again? What if next time he didn't go for Duke, but for me? I hated that thought. Hated that he'd put it there. I sat on the floor with Duke pressed against my chest, my arms wrapped around him like I was afraid he might vanish if I loosened my grip. For the first time since the funeral, I cried the kind of tears that don't make sound. The ugly ones, the exhausted ones, the ones that come when you're too tired to be dignified. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered into his fur. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Duke licked my cheek, slow and deliberate, like he was answering me. The next day was worse. I woke up to voicemail after voicemail from numbers I didn't recognize, from blocked calls, from people who thought they were entitled to my side of the story. Some were supportive, some were curious, some were cruel. One message stuck with me. You're really going to ruin a man's life over a dog? I deleted it, but the words stayed. For a moment, a brief, terrifying moment, I wondered if they were right. If I should have let it go. If I should have chosen peace over justice. If I was being too much, too emotional, too dramatic. That's the dangerous part. Not the lawsuit, not the lies, not even the betrayal. It's the way doubt creeps in when you're already broken. I stared at the lease on the counter, the ESA clause highlighted in yellow, proof, protection, law on my side. And still I felt small. Still I felt tired. Still, I felt like the world expected me to fold quietly and be grateful it hadn't been worse. That night, I dreamed of my father. He was standing in the kitchen, the way he used to when he was waiting for coffee to brew. Duke sat at his feet, tail thumping. You did the right thing, he said. I woke up with my heart pounding and tears already on my face. The dark moment isn't when everything falls apart. It's when you almost believe you deserved it. The shift didn't come with anger. It came with focus. The morning after the dream about my father, I woke up before my alarm, heart steady, in a way it hadn't been in weeks. Duke was sprawled across the foot of the bed, snoring softly, paws twitching like he was chasing something kind in his sleep. I made coffee, opened the blinds, sat at the table with my laptop and a legal pad. No spiraling, no doom scrolling, no rereading messages that didn't deserve space in my head. I started organizing. Timeline first. The text timestamp, the shelter intake form, the euthanasia schedule, the lease clause, the police report, the animal control visit, the lawsuit filing date. When I lined it all up, the pattern became impossible to ignore. He didn't act impulsively. He waited. He chose the day of my father's funeral because he knew I couldn't stop him. He lied because lies move faster than consent. He escalated because accountability scared him. And when consequences arrived, he reframed himself as the victim because that's what had always worked before. Not this time. I sent everything to my cousin. Every screenshot, every document, every voicemail. He called me an hour later. Okay, he said slowly. This is worse than I thought. That didn't scare me. It grounded me. He explained the strategy. Calm, methodical, ruthless, in the way only facts can be. Criminal charges were already moving forward. The civil suit he filed was weak, provably false, vindictive. He wants to scare you into settling, my cousin said. Don't. I'm not, I said, and meant it. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. The shelter manager called. I wanted to let you know, she said, that we're formally amending our records. The surrender was fraudulent. He signed documents claiming ownership of an animal that wasn't his. Fraud. The word landed heavy and satisfying. She told me they'd forwarded everything to their legal department, that the false aggression report had been flagged, that the shelter worker who processed Duke still hadn't stopped apologizing. You saved him, she said quietly, and you may save other animals too. For the first time since the funeral, I smiled. The real turning point came 2 days later. Court. I didn't see him right away. I heard him first. His voice echoing down the hallway, loud, performative, already telling a story he hoped someone would believe. When he finally spotted me, his confidence flickered. I stood straighter. I didn't glare. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. My cousin did. He dismantled the case piece by piece. Text admissions, shelter paperwork, the ESA classification under federal law, the lease violation, the timing, laid out minute by minute, The judge leaned forward. Why? He asked, voice sharp. Did you choose that specific day? Silence. He tried to laugh it off. I knew she'd be busy, he said. I didn't think it was a big deal. The judge didn't smile. So, he said, you deliberately waited until she was burying her father to remove her prescribed emotional support animal. The room went quiet. That was it. The moment the narrative collapsed, not because I argued, not because I begged, but because the truth doesn't need embellishment. When the ruling came down, I felt something unlock in my chest. Relief, not loud or dramatic, but deep. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd walked in. Duke was waiting at home, tail wagging so hard his whole body moved. I knelt on the floor and pressed my forehead to his. We're okay, I whispered. We're really okay. For the first time, I believed it. Consequences don't arrive all at once. They trickle in, they stack, they echo. The first official notice came 2 days after court. Criminal charges. The envelope was thick. Formal language, stamped seals, dates that made everything real. Theft of medical equipment, filing a false report, fraud related to surrender documentation. Each charge sat on the page like a weight he could no longer shove onto someone else. He tried calling. Once, then 10 times, then dozens. Blocked numbers, new numbers, voicemails that swung wildly between apologies and threats. I didn't think it would go this far. You're destroying me. You owe me for what you've done. I saved every message. I didn't respond. The next wave hit at his job. A woman from his workplace reached out to me on LinkedIn. Hesitant, professional, clearly uncomfortable. I'm sorry to ask, she wrote, but is it true he surrendered your emotional support dog during your father's funeral? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied, yes, I have court records if you need confirmation. Her response came almost immediately. Oh my God, he's been telling people you were abusive, that you kicked him out without warning. He's been collecting donations here, said he was homeless because of you. I sent the documents, every single one. By the end of the week, he was fired. Not for lying, for soliciting money under false pretenses. HR policies are very clear about that. That's when the spiral accelerated. His mother called again, crying this time. This is too much, she said. He's your responsibility too, you know. No, I said calmly. He stopped being my responsibility when he chose cruelty. She hung up. Then came the insurance company. A claim had been filed against my renter's insurance. Property damage totaling $5,000, allegedly caused when I packed his belongings. I sent them the videos, 3 hours of footage, me carefully folding clothes, bubble wrapping electronics, photographing pre-existing damage, labeling boxes. The claim was denied. An insurance fraud investigation was opened. By the following Monday, he had nowhere to go. Eviction on record. Criminal charges pending. A restraining order keeping him away from me and Duke. Apartment applications rejected one after another. A friend of his, someone I'd always gotten along with, reached out quietly. I thought you should know, she said. Landlords are Googling his name. I already knew what they were finding. A local article had picked up the story. Man charged after surrendering girlfriend's emotional support. Animal during father's funeral. The internet doesn't forget. Neither do background checks. The final blow came from a direction I didn't expect. His ex reached out. The one he'd always described as crazy, the one whose cat had run away. Hey, he wrote, I heard what happened. I think he did the same thing to my cat. He filed charges too. Pattern of behavior. That phrase showed up everywhere after that. In legal filings, in whispered conversations, in the way people stopped defending him. I watched it all from a distance. Not with glee, with clarity. This wasn't revenge. It was accountability catching up to someone who'd never faced it before. One night, as Duke slept beside me, I realized something had changed. The fear was gone. Not because the world was suddenly safe, but because I trusted myself again. I had documented, I had acted, I had protected what mattered. And I hadn't folded. 6 weeks after my father's funeral, the noise finally faded. Not disappeared, but softened. Like grief does when it stops demanding attention every second and settles into something you learn how to carry. Duke and I moved. Not far, just far enough to breathe. The new apartment has a small yard and a door that opens directly onto grass. The first morning we were there, Duke stood frozen in the doorway like he didn't trust it. Then he stepped outside and ran, full speed, ears back, tail high, circling the yard like he was mapping joy. I watched from the porch with a mug of coffee and felt something loosen in my chest. The settlement money covered the deposit. The rest went into savings. Practical, quiet, intentional. My father would have approved. He loved Duke, called him his grandpup. In his will, something I didn't know until after everything, he'd left money specifically for Duke's care: food, vet bills, emergencies. That was the kind of man he was. Sometimes we visit his grave. Duke lies in the grass while I talk. About the court case, about the move, about how Duke is safe now, about how I finally understand the difference between compromise and self-betrayal. I tell him I'm okay. And I am. I learned a few things through all of this, things no one tells you gently. That cruelty often wears the mask of convenience. That people who minimize your pain will always ask you to minimize it for them. That documentation is protection, and that love doesn't require you to abandon what keeps you alive. Duke still sheds everywhere. He's still afraid of butterflies. He still snores loud enough to wake me up at night. I wouldn't change a single thing. To everyone who reached out with support, thank you. Duke has more toys than he knows what to do with, and more treats than are probably responsible. He's living his best life. And to the man who thought my grief made me weak enough to exploit, I chose the dog. I would choose him again every single time.